But like most of my career, it's not been particularly intentional nor planned.
It would have been such an interesting learning curve.
You can change sectors or positions, but you can't change both.
The first time that you were a CEO, did you feel like this was a big step up?
There's no doubt that it was. At the time, there were protests at our conferences. And staff profit share is, when you really think about it, is a no-brainer in that regard.
Today's episode is sponsored by VXT, the phone system built for law firms. VXT integrates with practice management systems so that when lawyers make calls, their billable time and legal advice can be saved in the right place automatically. 20% of billable time goes unrecorded. A lot of that is phone calls that get forgotten about. Get some of those billables back using VXT. Go to vxt.co.nz or click the link in the description to find out more.
Cameron, I'm super excited to have you join us on the podcast today to talk about your career, as you have weaved yourself in and out of the law since university, eventually landing yourself in the role of CEO at Gibson Sheet. Before we dive into all of your experiences that landed you in this role, can you please share how you got into law in the first place?
Oh yeah, kia ora, yeah. Well, great to have the opportunity to be on your podcast. It's great to be able to tell one story, so really looking forward to it. Yeah, so my journey into the law was perhaps not a straightforward one. I didn't really think it was a career I wanted to pursue. In fact, it wasn't really something even on my radar through high school or anything like that. In fact, when I moved to Wellington to come to university at Victoria, I actually started with geology. So I was studying geology, and it became pretty clear to me pretty quickly that while it was fascinating understanding how the earth worked, I couldn't see myself doing an undergraduate degree looking through microscopes at rocks and minerals. So, and that left me with a little bit of a dilemma in my first year of university, thinking, gosh, I've spent this year doing what I thought I wanted to do, but actually it turns out it's not what I want to do. Fortunately, in that first year, I had also taken politics. And so I thought, okay, so these other subjects that I've done, what sort of is a wee bit interesting and what might be aligned to that? And I'd really enjoyed the politics paper. And so I thought, what looks a bit like politics? Law looked a bit like politics as part of the political process. So, yeah, so I thought, I'll enroll in first year law as well. So I didn't enroll in first year law until my second year at university. But it was a rather unconventional pathway into the law. But yeah, really glad that geology gave me the opportunity to see that law was my pathway.
I think it's quite common that you start taking something and then change completely. I picked up law in my second year as well, but I think those extra subjects that you can take here and there, they shine through later on in your career, which they also did for you as well.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed.
You had your first role at McVeigh. Can you tell me about your role there and how long you were there for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was at McVeigh as a summer clerk, and then started there as a graduate, initially in an employment law team under now Justice Cheryl Gwynn. She was a fantastic first boss to have, just a really amazing woman with a fantastic backstory through unions, through freezing work unions, in fact, and a partner at McVeigh in relatively short order after joining. And she just had a really personal approach to the law and a really kind way in which she worked with people and worked with her team. And that was a really great introduction into the law. Morphed into some sort of general litigation there under now Justice Koch and Justin Smith and Hamish McIntosh, or the late Hamish McIntosh, and some others. And then eventually, after a couple of years, had the opportunity to move into the sort of corporate and commercial team under Richard Mertens and Grant Wilson. And they were also fantastic and really taught me quite a lot about putting the client at the center of everything you do and making sure that whatever you're doing, whatever the law says, that you're trying really hard to make it work for the client and give the client the best possible outcome that you could get. So I'm really grateful for the experiences that they gave me, exposure to some amazing clients and some amazing people. Yeah, I really enjoyed my time there, and I was there about 5 or 6 years, something like that. Yeah, really great experience. It was some great people and great clients.
Sounds like you had some great mentors for those quite crucial parts of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if I'm honest, with all mentors, you take and leave parts of it. So there were aspects of all those people, which, as I've just said, I really admired and really valued. But there were also other parts of how they worked that I thought, oh, that might work for them. I don't think it's going to work for me. So you pick and choose a little bit, and you become a little bit of the amalgam of all of those experiences and people. And that's definitely the case for me.
Yeah, then add a twist of your own personality and style as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm sure, but they were formative. They were the first people in my legal career who I worked with closely and really admired a lot of what they did.
And so, unlike some people who start maybe as a summer clerk, then they want to go right the way through to make partner, was this something that you wanted to do when you first stood in the doorways as a summer clerk?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So coming in, yeah, you don't know any better. And at least in my case, yeah, that's absolutely what I thought I wanted and where I thought I wanted to be. They're great pathways through law firms into those types of roles. And it's certainly painted and presented to you as that's the pinnacle of a career in a law firm, at least as a lawyer. So, yeah, absolutely. On day one, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed summer clerk, absolutely. That's 100% what I thought I wanted to do.
So, you didn't end up doing that. You ended up back at what would also be the pinnacle as a CEO. But why did you not want to keep pursuing that partner pathway?
Yeah, I guess like a number of people in law firms, that it perhaps might not be for you, that you might want to see and experience other parts of being a lawyer and utilizing your skills for the benefit of client or clients. And that was certainly the case for me. I know that at Russell McVeigh, there's some, as with other firms, there are really high expectations that are placed upon people coming into the partnership. And I just decided that actually I had a few more things I'd like to achieve outside a law firm partnership rather than getting too far down that pathway. So yeah, I elected after that sort of period of time, after 5 or 6 years, that actually I was going to do something outside the firm, and that's what I did.
So that's what you did. You left and you went in-house. You switched your suit for a tracksuit and you joined New Zealand Rugby. Have you always been a sports fan?
Yeah, I had a pretty typical upbringing. I really enjoyed my sports as a kid, and yeah, some might say I enjoyed them too much, but I really enjoyed sport. It was definitely a part of my life, and the dream of working somewhere in rugby was perhaps not something I'd ever considered could become a reality, but when the opportunity arose, it wasn't too difficult a choice to say, yeah, I'd love to have that opportunity. And a great environment. If you think about what really motivates people and drives people in terms of their work or the work they do for their clients, if they believe in the kaupapa of that client, then it's going to be a pretty easy thing to jump out of bed every morning and race to work and want to do your best there. And when you think about something like rugby or any sport or full purpose type organization, it's pretty easy to have a strong connection to that and to have empathy for that. And that was certainly the case. It's a great environment, a lot of professional challenge, but also, as I say, the kaupapa of the organization was pretty cool.
That's awesome. And I think when you're focusing on, well, you go from the professional services industries where you're working with a bunch of different clients or different projects all the time, and then you get to switch and you can focus on one thing and focus on growing that, which is cool and awesome in itself.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it gives you the opportunity to cross-fertilize skills, different parts of what you've worked on or that you're interested or involved in. You find that often these sort of come together, Sophie, and yeah, and rugby's a good example of that there were lots of commercial and corporate skills that I developed at Russell McVeigh, and they became really useful. You know, lots of relationship skills that I developed in various spheres. They were really useful. The professional skills, they were really useful as well, because at that particular time, rugby was, I guess it was 10 or so years professional. It was still a bit of a mix of really passionate people and some professional people. So there's sort of those balances. So yeah, all of those skills in each new role, you bring all the little bits with you. Discard, as I said before, discard the bits that you think, oh, I don't think that's quite right or isn't right in that environment. Yeah, so rugby was a good example of that.
So your next two roles, you didn't intentionally start looking for a new role, but both times you got a phone call and you ended up working at the Natural Gas Corporation and then Contact Energy. At Contact Energy, this is the first time you stepped into more of a legal management role. Was that intentional, stepping away from doing the law itself every day to more of that management side?
It wasn't intentional. Like most of my career, it's not been particularly intentional nor planned. But, I guess often opportunity comes perhaps when you're not expecting it, and always figure it's easier to say yes usually than it is to say no. And generally speaking, that served me really well. Opportunities arise, and generally speaking, unless there's a strong reason not to pursue them, I have tended to pursue them. And often it comes back to the people. If there are really great people sitting behind those opportunities, then that makes it that much easier as well. So more directly to your question, it wasn't in any way a deliberate decision to go down that path. But as these things evolve, you move a bit further away from the practice of law and into the management of people practicing law. And probably, if I'm honest, I suspect once one moves in-house from private practice, you've already started down that pathway to some degree anyway. And I guess I found that I really enjoyed, or more enjoyed, managing people who were doing the legal work, perhaps a little bit more than I enjoyed doing the work myself. And largely because I guess I just like that ability to collaborate with others, bounce ideas off them, support them to deliver to their clients. And so I just found that those were really great opportunities. And the two companies that you were talking about, they're both large energy companies, quite a change from rugby. But I'd done quite a lot of energy sector related work when I was in private practice. So it was a little bit of a homecoming in that regard. So the content was relatively easy for me at least, to understand and pick up on. Someone said to me once that you can change sectors or positions, but you can't change both. So you can't go from being, I don't know, a legal person to a commercial person at the same time in which you change from rugby to energy or something like that. And there's probably something to that. I think having some degree of an understanding of what's going on is really quite key. And one of the streams that I'd say has flowed through my career, or perhaps as a mantra, is that context is key. If you understand somebody's context, it will really help you to help them. So that can apply both in respect of a client. So if you really understand a client's work, what their challenges are, what their operating environment is, perhaps what's even happening for them personally, then that context is really important to enable you to serve them. But equally, when you work within and with teams, understanding the context within which they operate, the challenges that they're trying to navigate, the opportunities that might be just around the corner, the dynamics amongst the team, that context is really important. And I think sometimes we lose a little bit of sight of that. And in fact, if you ever find yourself in that situation where you feel like you may have lost, you might not be winning the battles you want to win, it might be useful just to circle back and say, hold on, what's the context here? What's actually going on? And then reframing or refocusing the support you're providing, the advice, whatever it might be, back towards that particular context.
I think what you've just explained then highlights the leadership skills that you've developed over your various roles. And the next role that you had was stakeholder engagement at New Zealand Oil and Gas. What did that role involve, being completely outside of a legal role?
Yeah, I was approached by a good friend of mine who was the chief executive of that company, and he was looking to do oil and gas, but probably more likely natural gas exploration in regions of New Zealand where that hadn't previously occurred. So there weren't communities like Taranaki where there's existing oil and gas production. There weren't communities like that who had a good understanding of it, the benefits, the trade-offs and the like. So he had this idea, if you set a stakeholder groups in these communities, and you were agnostic as to what people's views were when you recruited them to them, that you would get a good cross-section of that community, and you'd understand the issues that might be facing them, and you could work to perhaps build the engagement with that community, not necessarily get everybody on side, but at least understand the issues and what you might have to confront to progress that. And he asked me to do that. I thought, oh, great, sounds fantastic. And it was fantastic because it's a sector that rightly is subject to a lot of scrutiny. There's no hiding that the emissions from the burning of fossil fuels is a large contributor to climate change, yet on the other hand, that they're still fuels that people rely on to a large extent. There are lots of elements and aspects to that. These particular areas were off the coast of the South Island, some pristine marine areas, so all of those factors. But they were also in communities where some of them saw the potential for the economic benefit, the job creation, those sort of things that it could create. And they were just really fantastic opportunities to talk with a lot of people, really. Understand and yeah, as I say, being agnostic as to whether somebody had a view. So you'd have these panels where there were very strong views for and against the possibility of this company doing exploration work in that rohe. And yeah, they were great, and a really great kind of learning that actually you may never agree with somebody on something, but at least if you can understand their perspective, you can understand why they hold the views they do, and perhaps what you might be able to do to ease pathways for them, or at least have them equally understand why it is that this particular activity is an important one or could add some value. So yeah, that was great. It was a really great experience, and a lot of time in a beautiful part of our country, up and down the South Island. Lots of connection with the Runaka of Ngaitahu, who obviously are all up and down the South Island. So yeah, it was great. It was a really great role.
I was going to ask what your biggest takeaway was in terms of leadership and communication. You summed that up quite nicely with the lessons you learned about communicating and understanding why people hold the views that they do. Is there anything else that you'd add as a big takeaway from this experience that's helped you now in your role as a CEO, or your next role where you were a CEO?
I think probably just a variant on the same theme, really, which is yeah, that idea of communicating, and communicating is not just talking. Communicating is listening as well, and not being afraid to, in the face of evidence to the contrary, change your opinion. That what you might have thought was a really good option and pathway in that role for that particular community, when faced with evidence to the contrary from that community, you do have to take that on board and listen to it. It might still go down the same pathway, but you'll be doing that in the full knowledge of what that means. So yeah, I guess just that idea of communication and being prepared to change your approach or pathway based on what information you hear and receive. Yeah, I think we're all a little bit guilty of that. We get a bit blinkered and focused on what we think the right outcome is, and sometimes just having that opportunity to take on board that other perspective is really valuable.
It sounds like it would have been a great prep for what was your next role at Pepans as CEO. The first time that you were a CEO, did you feel like this was a big step up?
In some respects, yeah, absolutely. But I guess I've always had a belief that you can do anything you put your mind to, and also that if others believe you can do it, and others that you trust believe you can do it, then no reason why you can't. And you won't know everything on day one. The key, like a lot of these things, is surrounding yourself with good people to supplement your knowledge, perhaps challenge you where you might go down a pathway or along a tangent that's not quite right. Yeah, I think that's one of the keys of leadership, actually, is not surrounding yourself with yes people, but perhaps surrounding yourself with no people, and also people who complement and supplement your own skills base. So I suspect, like most people in their first CEO role, they're not equipped with all of the tools they need to do that job because they've never done it before. But if you believe you can do it, and you believe that you can learn the things that you don't know, and that you can have good people around you to support you, then yeah, anything's possible. And that was certainly the case. Certainly the case with Pepans. You know, it was a really good established team, a really strong board. Yeah, and I felt incredibly supported in that role. And my predecessor in the role had set up a really good platform as well and built the credibility of the organisation. In some respects, came in at a time at which it was strong and respected, which sort of made things a little bit easier. Also, because a lot of the focus of that sector at the time was on Taranaki, where I was born and bred, so I had a natural ability in that space to draw on that background that I'd had in that province. And my father had worked in the industry, so that was a helpful insight as well. I could ask him technical questions, so that was a real benefit as well. I think that you often find when you go into a new role that, perhaps as we were talking about a little bit earlier, that you find the various experiences that you've had over time actually equip you quite well to move things forward. Touched on it being a controversial sector, and there's no doubt that it was. At the time, there were protests at our conferences. We tried to be very open and transparent about everything we did. We published every single bit of paper we had. If we met with a minister or a political figure, we would publish the briefings on our website. It wasn't hard to work out what we're saying and who we were saying it to. We were transparent about where our conferences were, what we were going to talk about, all of that stuff. But of course, that opens you up to protest action, and in some cases really disruptive protest action. So nothing really equips you to deal with that. So you have to go back to your first principles about, okay, this is a problem, it's a problem we've got to solve, and we've got to solve it now. What do we do? Really positive learnings, even in the times of quite strong adversity in that sector.
That would have been such an interesting learning curve, because no matter what you do, I think you're always going to be on two different sides of the argument in that situation. So all the background you had in stakeholder engagement and even being transparent, it would have been a big test.
Oh, no doubt. People rightly hold really strong views about that sector, about its, as I said before, about the contribution of burning fossil fuels to climate change. Are really serious matters, and it's right that people hold strong views about it, balanced, of course, against the value that sector has generated and continues to generate, not just for New Zealand, but for people all around the world.
I mentioned at the start of the podcast that you've weaved your way in and out of the law, and we've covered the out of the law part. And now weaving back in to your role as CEO now at Gibson Sheet, I'd love to learn how you think about running a law firm. You mentioned that the overall strategy for Gibson Sheet is great people using the best tools, making clients happy. So I'd love to break that down into perhaps people, clients, and technology to get an idea of what you do day to day or how you approach different things in those categories.
Sure.
Starting with people, I know that you did a big project when you first started around uncovering values. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think exactly as you say, people are central to all activity. Business is about human activity. It's about human to human activity. It's about making things happen for other humans, with other humans. So people just have to be at the center of what you do. You could have a law firm or a widget factory, and without the people, it would just be, in our case, an office with computers, or in a widget factory, a factory with widget making machines. But without the people, it's not much good. And so if you appreciate the centrality of people, then you start to think quite differently about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and how those people need to be. You need to be really conscious and careful of what's important to them. And one of the ways in which I think it's quite useful to frame that is the values discussion, because values are about how people interact between themselves and with others, and the behaviors that they exhibit. And there's a lot of academic writing and theory and management theory and all the rest of it on values alignment, and it all says what you'd expect it to say, which is, if you have strong values alignment to the organization you work in, you'll be really successful there, and if of course you don't, then you won't. And it's not to say that someone's values are good or bad. They just might not be aligned to that organization's values, which also might not be good or bad. But values, as you said, we went through a process to uncover them. We did have some values. And when I started, I met with everyone here one-on-one, just said, hey, look, what's really great about working here? What could we do better? Oh, and by the way, what are our values? And very few people could tell me what they were, which was a bit of a signal that perhaps the words that we described as our values, in fact, weren't our values, and that maybe they were something else. So we went through this process to uncover them. And I knew it would be successful because in those one-on-one conversations, people had actually told me what the real values were. They hadn't all used the same words, but they all spoke to what the actual values of the organization were. So one of the values that came up really strongly was this idea of family or whānau, or hey, we're all in this together. And as it's turned out, one of our values through our sort of uncovering process was the value of connected. So that's quite clearly that same expression, and it's not a word that anybody used. They all use different words, as I said, but it's quite clearly a value that already existed. So that uncovering them was just saying, what actually are they? What are the values of being here? And for us, as I say, it's connected, it's real, it's brave, and it's make their day. And I also wouldn't have used those exact words, but as values, those are very clearly the concepts that people who work at Gibson Sheep believe are our values. And it's not like we paint them on walls and sing them every day or anything like that, but it's the sort of things that if you see those exhibited in people, you know that things will be done in the way that's really important to us. And equally, sometimes we err, sometimes we make mistakes and we act inconsistent with our values. And we should feel brave enough to call each other out on that. I have no problem with someone saying to me, oh, hey, Cameron, that didn't seem very real. That didn't seem very real. I think you're being very authentic.
Yeah, and I like how they ended up being the same words that people were saying, but you just had to rephrase it so that it was actually the words that people were familiar with and using every day. And I think by making sure that those are on point and written down, it gives a good opportunity if people do want to bring something up to someone. It's a good way to do it by having them written, and you can say, these are our values, and I don't really think you're acting like that right now, rather than having to just say, I don't like the way you're acting. It's a bit more feels like a more soft approach to something. Another part of the people aspect of your strategy not your strategy, about your job, is motivating people at all levels of the firm, so partners, juniors. You shared with me something new that you've started, which is the profit share scheme. Can you tell me about this?
Yeah, so we undertake staff surveys every year. Like a lot of organizations do that. And one of the things that came through pretty clearly in a number of those surveys, in fact, every survey probably, something that comes through is what people really want is reward and recognition. So reward is about money, and come to that in a moment, and recognition is about, hey, look, Sophie, that was a great job. I really appreciate what you did. You did it in a great way. So we've got a few programs to just nudge people along to say, hey, look, just remember, it'd be really good to celebrate that really cool thing that Sophie did. So we call it our Ka Pai program, and it's just a monthly nudge to people to say, hey, what's a good thing someone's done? So that's the recognition side. On the reward side, we're in a competitive market like everybody else. So then we thought, okay, well, how else could we think about this? What might be another way to answer staff's concerns and desire to see a higher reward for their efforts? And what could also benefit the firm? So and staff profit share is, when you really think about it, is a no-brainer in that regard. It provided people work hard and use their discretionary efforts, do those extra things or look for efficiencies, that will increase the profit for the firm, which is both great for the owners of that firm, but also great for the individuals who have participated in that and sought to increase it. And I guess the shortcut way of saying that is it better aligns everybody to the commercial goals of the firm. That at the end of the day, that's what it does. And the way our scheme operates is we try and recognise everybody's efforts, even though it's harder to measure some people's efforts. If you're a fee earner, a lawyer, or a legal exec, it's quite easy to say, oh, look, you did X dollars of budget and therefore you're doing great. But for our support staff and our administrative staff, it's a little harder to see that, at least in a sort of purely dollars metrics form. So what we did is we split it into two pools. Everybody's eligible for both pools. One pool is directly related to salary, and the other pool is performance and relativity based, which just gives us a little bit of ability to look at each person individually and say, oh, what did Sophie do here? How did she contribute overall to that increase in profitability? And we're only in our first year. Perhaps if we have a repeat session of this podcast, I might better report back. But it does, I think we're quite hopeful that it will actually produce some really strong results for staff and also for the firm. And it will recognise the efforts that individuals put in to help contribute to that.
Yeah. I really love it. Shows some innovation and good for retention and great for overall morale and motivation of everyone. I know that would be a good enticing factor for me to work really hard if I was working at Gibson Sheet.
Hey, there's always time. There's always time. You got a law degree.
So we've covered the people side. So what about the keeping clients and making clients happy side? Can you give some examples of what Gibson Sheet does there, or maybe how you innovate in that area?
So loops us back to that context is key. If you really understand your client and their relationships, what's important to them, you can really give them the best possible service. And like anyone who you give really good service to, they'll probably tell others. They'll probably say, "Hey, you should go and see Sophie. She's really great. So it's both the right thing to do because they are your client, paying you good money for you to help them. So you should treat them as best you possibly can. I had someone describe it to me once as treat everyone like they're your nana. And I really like that because, of course you're going to treat your nana well, right? You're going to go that little extra mile. You're going to just take a little bit of extra time to just make sure nana's okay.
I think
that. I do too. I think it's a great mantra. It weaves into our value of make their day. It's another way to say it. I just think that it's a really good concept of care. And if you care for your clients, you care about getting them their best outcome, then you can't help but be successful. And sometimes that means that you actually say, I can't help you legally. It's not a legal problem, but maybe you could do this or talk to that person. So I think trying to deliver clients their best outcome is a really important component. And looking after your existing clients is critical. It's attractive to see if you can find new clients and generate new business, but at the same time, you've got to be really careful and conscious that you continue to serve and be available to your existing clients. So I think that's the most important part there. We have more recently, flipping to the new client piece, we have more recently been undertaking quite a lot of digital marketing, utilizing various digital campaigns, landing pages and the like, and that's proving to be quite successful for us. Just allows us to better target certain work areas where we have expertise, and we probably see ourselves doing more of that going forward. But that's just a way of finding the client. But once they are the client, we want to, again, care for them, treat them really well, make sure we help them, deliver them the outcome that they want. And of course, you have to ask them. You have to say, hey, did we meet your needs? Did we deliver you what you wanted?
And do you have a formal process to how you get that feedback from clients?
So it's soon to be more formal for all clients. So we'll do some survey work, but it's always probably been the client who writes to you or calls you and says, hey, that was a great job. So we share those sort of things around the firm. We call it good stuff, a little play on GS. So we share around the firm every couple of weeks some really good feedback or bits and pieces of things that are happening, so people hear about those things. Through the digital channels, that's more automated, so we get that more immediate feedback through the digital channels. But as I say, we're about to do a client survey, so we hope to get a bit more information and perhaps some more granular information about what things are important to clients and how we can really support them better.
And so who leads that directive? Is that partner driven, or is that in your realm, or operations?
So we operate as the way we operate is you've touched on those sort of elements of our strategy, and then each year of the strategy has a business plan, and the business plan is signed off by partners with the budget each year, and then essentially that's then delegated to myself, and we call it the executive committee, which is sort of like a board, which is partners and me, and we go off and do the things in the business plan. Some of those involve checkbacks with the wider partnership, but generally speaking, the stuff's been worked through and discussed, and then we kick on and do it.
It's always interesting to learn more about the operations and day-to-day, how things like that get done. And so to the last part of your strategy, technology, there are a lot of different technologies you can use in a law firm. And I know that recently you've switched practice management systems. That would be quite a big project. How long does that project take from starting to recognize you need a new practice management system to actually landing on a practice management system and implementing it?
It's a really good question. Longer than it takes, probably. Longer than it actually takes, at least in our case. I think for us, we previously were using Infinity Law and had for a very long time, and it was a mature product. It did everything that we needed it to do, but we got the sense that it probably wasn't likely to be developed further. And its acquisition a couple of years ago by Leap, probably cemented for us that wasn't the case, because they had another product that they wanted to transition people to. So one way or another, we knew that our existing system was not one we could be on forever. We had a sort of pretty strong ambition to get into the cloud as well. So, removing anything that relied on a physical server somewhere was quite important to us. So that was, again, another factor that sort of said it's not going to be Infinity, because it relies on that server infrastructure. And I guess the final one is we didn't know all of the things we'd want to do in the future. We just knew that they couldn't be, no idea really, or not many ideas for new things could be supported by that particular system. So all of those things come together, and you go, yeah, okay, we can just keep using it and getting what we get and not being particularly innovative on the other side, or we can look around and see what the options might be. And that's what we did. And we looked pretty broadly at all ends, all parts of that spectrum of systems that were available. And it became pretty obvious to us that we're not the big end of town. So those systems that are more tailored to those particular firms are probably not the right ones for us, and nor are we a 2, 3, 4 person firm. So those systems are not particularly suited to us as well. And that really left us with just a handful of options, and then one of those options purchased the other one. It left us probably with one primary option that we were looking at. But we're really happy. We had to, like anything, it's a big, your core operating system is something that's really important. So you need to build a strong business case around why do you think you should change? Why now? Why not wait? The cost, the potential disruption, all of those things. So we had to take all of that into account. And then in terms of the actual project to transition it, we were fortunate to again, another benefit of the LawLink group, another LawLink firm had recently been through the same transition. So we were able to learn from them, and they had chosen Velata as the implementation partner. So we started a discussion with them. We were pretty sure we wanted to do NetDocs as well. So we started a conversation with them, and obviously with Action Step. And we we really needed a longer project than we had. We knew going into it that we were cutting it really fine, and we didn't leave a lot of contingency in our project. But the reason for that really was the renewal cycle on the then existing system. We couldn't budge that. So, if we didn't do a quick project, we'd be waiting another year, and that wasn't really something we wanted to do. So we did a split project. We did a let's get live, and then let's do our sort of phase 2 of things we really want to do. But yeah, we're really happy with it. Like all newer products, it's not a mature product, but that's what's good about it. It does some things a lot better than Infinity did, and some things not as good. But it's developing and evolving. The roadmap looks really good. There's lots of integrations. Yeah, we were really happy with that decision. But yeah, like all major projects, I wish you had more time to do them, because you could do a lot more of the work that you wanted to do in advance of them. But overall, really happy with the project, on budget, on time, all of those things.
Yeah. I really love what you said about it's not mature, but that's the best thing about it. I think with all the new technology out there, that's definitely, it's more risky, but the reward can often be far greater by going with a less mature product.
Yeah, you just have to be prepared for a little bit of that sort of growing pain.
Yeah, and that's why I guess it's important to pick someone, a partner who can work closely with to get through those growing pains and hopefully build out the platform in a way that's good for you, because it will probably be good for other firms similar to yourself.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably one of the great things I think about the legal profession in New Zealand, is that while it's clearly a business as well, it is still a collegial profession, and you find that there are people who are very willing to share with you their experiences with the likes of a new practice management system or IT or other product that you might be looking at to enhance your practice, and they do that really willingly, and we've been the recipient of that, and we're really happy to offer our perspectives to other firms as well, and we've been doing that, and I think it's a real strength. It's a real strength of the sector that people want to help each other, even though in some respects they could be competitors, but they really they want what's best for others to help others achieve their best as well. And I think it's a real strength.
Yeah, that's the wrap up of the main things I wanted to ask you. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of things in there that are really practical for people thinking about strategy in their own law firms, or even juniors who might come up with ideas to suggest to partners and CEOs. But to wrap up this podcast, I have some quick fire questions for you. So
Sure.
I'll just say it, then you can say a sentence or a question. First of all, what do people not understand about the law that you wish they did?
That it's a method of achieving a particular outcome, but it's not the only method. Some things require specific legal tasks and ticks and the like, but it's a method of achieving an outcome. It's not an end in itself. It's a tool.
And if you could give someone a piece of advice that was in your position when you first started at Russell McVeigh as a summer clerk, what would it be?
Context is key.
Nice. And last but not least, if you weren't a lawyer or CEO of a law firm, what would be your dream job?
Well, not geologist, obviously. I think anything that had opportunity to engage with lots of people. Yeah, learn different things, talk to different people, get different perspectives, learn from others. I don't really know what that role is.
Kind of sounds
Maybe
like that role you had, the stakeholder engagement. I guess
Yeah,
that can cross
maybe,
over so
yeah.
many different industries.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it's storyteller but imbued with the content and input from other people, maybe sharing what I've learned. I quite enjoy that too. I quite enjoy talking to people, not only about what's going on for them, but also about what I might be able to help them with or support them with. So sort of a connector sort of role. I don't know.
Love it.
Don't really answer your question, did I?
Yeah, it does. Sometimes you don't know what your dream job is. Nice. Well, thank you so much, Cameron. There's so much we can pull out here for our listeners. If people would like to get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Yes, Cameron.Madgwick@gibsonsheet.com, and all the socials, Cameron Madgwick on LinkedIn, Gibson Sheet CEO on X, Gibson Sheet and Facebook. I think we're on Insta as well. So yeah, no, all the socials, or name.name.
Great. I can link those as well.
Awesome.
Thanks, Cameron.
Awesome. Thanks, Sophie.
Cool.